Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Revolution Mindset Program, Session 6, where today we're going to be looking at bridging the communication gap. If you're tuned in, please say hi, let me know you're here. And as always, we're going to open up with our achievements over the past week. What have we achieved in our first week of February? Let me know in the comments box below so we can celebrate this together and we can keep that momentum going throughout the whole of these 52 weeks. Brenda Lees, it's great to see you here. Thank you so much for tuning in. It's great. You're excited. You said hi twice, which is absolutely fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you taking your time out. So if you're tuning in, please let me know your achievement over the past week, the first week of February. What have you achieved? I would love to celebrate this with you. And whilst I'm waiting for you guys to share your achievements, Adele, it's great to see you here. Thank you so much for tuning in. Luchmi, it's wonderful to see you. Thank you for being here. It's great to see everybody here. Please share your achievements so we can get that and keep that momentum going throughout the year. So in this session, looking at bridging the communication gap. First of all, we're going to talk about what the communication gap is. We're then going to look at what the role of playing the speaker and playing the listener, some questions we can ask ourselves when we are playing the speaker and playing the listener in our day-to-day conversations and our communications. And then we're going to be looking at how we can start to use conscious language to ensure that we become better communicators with those around us. And I'll share a little bit more about what we're going to be doing in the Putting It Into Practice workshop. We're going to be taking these concepts a little bit deeper. And before we jump in to today's session, here is the key learning from last session where we started to look at the importance of setting boundaries. And we covered that if we give people an inch, they will take a mile, and there's only so much distance we can give to others. So we're limited on how much we can give. So it's important that we don't give people an inch because they will take a mile, and that we have those boundaries in place to preserve our energy and making sure that we're giving our energy to the right people. So I'm going to come back and see if there is any achievements over the past week in the first week of February. So Adela says, I improved on relationships. That's absolutely wonderful. Who did you improve relationships with? Let us know. That's fantastic. We're going to celebrate that with a little bit of confetti. So let's get that going. Anybody else? What achievements? Brenda Lees, Luchmi, you're tuned in. What achievements have you achieved, reached over the first week of February? And if any of our coaches are watching this on the replay, if any of our coaches are tuned in who passed our ethics exam, that is a huge achievement. We had 4 of our coaches pass their ethics exam, which is absolutely fantastic. If you're tuned in, please say hi. Brenda Lee's saying is, I developed and published a hypnosis offer. That's absolutely fantastic. Consistency in my indoor cycling routine, and sleep, sleep, and sleep. 3 wonderful achievements. Let's celebrate that with a little bit of confetti. Well done, Brenda Lees. That is 3 amazing achievements. Keep that momentum up. Keep these wins coming so we can feed this energy through the whole of the 52 weeks. If anybody else wants to share their achievements, their wins, please drop them in the comments box. Now, I'm conscious there's a little bit of an issue with, if you're watching this from my personal profile, if you're watching this from Wisdom Creators on Facebook, then there is a little bit of an issue with the comments feeding through. We're looking into that and getting that fixed. So if you are tuned in through Wisdom Creators and I'm not seeing your comments, please, I apologize. Please go and join the YouTube link, or you can watch it directly on my personal profile. So let's move into today's session, but please keep those achievements coming. What are we talking about when we start to look at the communication gap? And I want to open up with a quote from J.G. Bennett that says, we tend to see ourselves primarily in the light of our intentions, which are invisible to others, whilst we see others primarily in the light of their actions, which are visible to us. Now, just take a moment to reflect on that. We tend to see ourselves primarily in the light of our intentions, which are invisible to others, whilst we see others primarily in the light of their actions, which are visible to us. And if we were to put this in, I'm going to open up a question. What does that bring to you? Before I share a diagram and explain the awareness/communication gap, what does that bring for you? How do you identify the gap that J.G. Bennett is sharing here? So Adele is saying that she is got a better relation to her family members, her niece and kids, and I'm accepting them more for who they are. That's absolutely wonderful, Adele. Thank you so much for sharing that. I will do another bit of confetti on that one. That's absolutely fantastic that you're building those relationships. That's a great achievement. So, what does this highlight for you? We tend to see ourselves primarily on the light of our intentions, which are invisible to other people. So, we judge ourselves based on our intentions. Other people cannot see our intentions, whilst we judge other people in the light of their actions, which we can see. So Brenda Lee's saying here that others also have an intention which is not always clear to us. Exactly. That's one important point from that is other people have intentions. We can't see the intentions of other people. We can only see their actions. And Brenda Lee's that nicely leads us on to what is known as the communication or the awareness gap. So whenever we're communicating with other people, if we bring that and summarize and simplify that, we judge ourselves by our intentions and we don't think about the impact our actions are having on the other people, and we judge others by the impact that they have on us without trying to understand their intentions. And this creates that awareness and communication gap, which is going to break down relationships, which is not going to help us communicate properly if we don't become aware of this and we don't start to change things consciously. And there's two ways in which we can bridge this gap. First of all, we can start to consciously become aware of the impact our actions and what we do and what we say are having on other people. That's when we're coming from the top part of the diagram here. And equally, we can also start to try and understand the intentions of other people, become more consciously aware of the intentions of other people, and not just judge them by their actions and what they're saying to us and the impact that they're having on that. So there's two ways from both perspectives there that we can start to bridge this awareness or communication gap. And I'm going to come back to the comments just to see if anybody else has brought anything through. So Brenda Lee saying, so if either part do not know the other part's intention, this creates a communication gap. Exactly. If we don't know the intentions and we're just judging each other based on our actions and we're not trying to communicate our intentions correctly, or we're not trying to understand the other person's intentions, there's going to be this awareness and communication gap. And the more that we fail to communicate correctly with other people, the more that relationship is going to start to break down. Adele is asking the question, does our actions intentions line up? That's an important question to ask ourselves. When we look at some questions, when we start to play the role of speaker, when we start to play the role of listener in our day-to-day communications, but does our actions intentions line up? Because sometimes there's ulterior motives. We can get into the pack model here, different ego states. Are we coming from a place of parent, adult, or child? Is it cross transactions? And I'm not going to go into all those psychological terms. We're going to keep it simple for today. The first thing to be aware of is that when we're communicating, because we judge ourselves by our intentions and we judge others by their impact, we create an awareness or communication gap. So Lakshmi is saying, how can we be aware of others' intentions when intentions are not tangible compared to actions? So Lakshmi, how do you think you could tackle that? How can you start to become aware of other people's intentions? We're going to start to look at that now. So we're going to start to go to this. Priya, it's great to see you. I just seen you tuned in. Thank you so much for being here. It's wonderful to see you. And please feel free to share your achievements. We can still celebrate them as we're going through here. So awareness and communication. So before we go into the speaker and the listener, we need to understand that our awareness drives our communication. So the more aware we are, the more conscious we are, the more we are going to communicate in a different way. If we start to seek to understand the other person's intentions rather than just judging them by their actions, then we're going to communicate a lot better. Which leads us on nicely to the more conscious we become, the better we communicate. So if we're always judging ourselves based on our intentions and we're not starting to look at the impact that our actions and our words are having on the other person, then we're going to struggle to communicate in a way. We're going to continue delivering things in the way that we're used to, that we're programmed to, and not necessarily understanding that we're not having a positive impact on the other people. And we can dive deep into emotional maturity here. There's lots of different areas that communication covers. Remember, we're just going through a simple high level look at this today, and we go deeper in the putting it into practice workshop. The other point to note is we must seek to understand the intention of others. So whilst you make a really good point, Lakshmi, that, intentions aren't tangible, it's not something we can see, it's not something we can find, through our communication, through conscious language, we can start to find out what that other person's intentions are. Half the time people mean well, they have good intentions, they just aren't putting themselves across, or they're not communicating in a way that is supportive, inclusive, and helpful. So we must seek to understand the intentions of others by being curious, by asking questions, by understanding where they're coming from, through empathy. Lots of stuff we'll cover in just a second. And the fourth point there is, it's very important when we're communicating to say what we mean and mean what we say. Often we can say something that we don't mean, we're not clear in the language that we use, we're not clear in the words that we're using, which can break down communication, and it can confuse people. People won't be fully aware of our intentions if we're not saying what we mean. And then the follow-up to that is mean what we say, is if we're promising something, if we're saying something that we're going to be doing something, we're making some kind of commitment, we need to follow up with what we're saying. So say what we mean what we say, something very important that I always click on to whenever we communicate. So that is awareness and communication. And we're going to look at speaker and listening, some questions for us to think about to go into this a little bit deeper. Adele is saying, looking for what is not said. Exactly. I'm going to talk about that in just a second, because you raise a really good point there, Adele. So before we jump in, I just want to leave you with this thought, and something that we need to keep in mind whenever we are in a conversation, whenever we're communicating, whether it's just day to day, whether we're working on projects with other people, or if we're finding ourselves in some kind of conflict, we need to remember that communication is not about bringing our own pre-cooked meals. It's about cooking something up together. So take away, leave your judgments, your preconceived ideas, your assumptions at the door when you enter these communications, when you enter conversations. Come with the ingredients and the gifts and the values that you have to share, and understand that you're cooking something together. You're not bringing your pre-cooked meal, the other person's not bringing their pre-cooked meals, and then you're eating there, having a conversation just on what you focus. It's about cooking something together. So it's a little bit of analogy there for you to start to think about how you can communicate. So playing the role of speaker. So some questions to think about when we are the speaker. We're going to look deeper into this when we have our opening kind of reflective question for the workshop in 15 minutes time. But the first question to ask ourselves, are our intentions clear? So Dale made a good point earlier on. Are our actions and intentions the same? Do they line up? Are we actually acting the way we intend to act? Or do we have some intentions, but what we say isn't aligned with that intentions, or what we do isn't aligned with that intention? So are our intentions clear? The second thing, are we saying what we think? Often we cannot be honest. Sometimes we hold things back, whether we're scared to say something, whether we don't want to hurt somebody else's feelings, and we tend to not say what we think. You'll find yourself in conversations where you're saying things, but it's not actually what you think. And the biggest example of this, and we see this all the time, imagine you're sat in a restaurant and you've been served some food, you're with your friends or your partner or whoever, you get served some food, it's cold, it's not nice, you're sat there, you're telling your partner or your friends, oh, this is horrible, it's not so nice, it's not so nice. The waitress or waiter walks by and says, everything okay with your meal? And you turn around and says, yeah, lovely, thanks, fine, because we don't want to hurt the intentions. We don't say what we think. So it's okay for us to say what we think, but we need to do it in a way that's constructive and in a way that is honest, but also not going to be direct and affect that other person. So are we saying what we think? The third point, are we reacting or responding? So whenever we're in the communication, we're playing the role of speaker, it's important for us to respond rather than react. So are you responding? Are you reacting? Are you letting your emotions take over? And are you reacting to something that they've said? Or are you taking your time to think and process things through and respond to that other person? And underlying all of this communication, which we're not going to go into deep, we'll cover this later on in the program, is emotional maturity and emotional intelligence that we can work on to build on, to make sure that we always respond rather than react. And finally, what role is our ego playing in this communication? Are we being led by our ego? Is our ego taking over because we want to get a point across, or because we want to show that we're right, or because we have our own perceived conceptions and judgments, and we're bringing them into the space? What role is our ego playing in our day-to-day communications? So there's some questions to think about when we're playing the role of the speaker. When we play the role on the listener, on the other hand, we need to ask ourselves the question, are we listening to listen, or are we listening to respond? Often we just listen to respond. As soon as we hear something that we want to respond to, we switch off. We don't listen to the rest of what the other person's got to say, and we wait for our gap to put in what we want to respond with. We don't listen to listen. So first question to ask ourselves. The next question is, are we empathizing? Are we showing empathy? Are we trying to put ourselves in the shoes of the other person? If we put ourselves in the shoes of the other person, maybe then we can start to understand what their intentions are and begin to bridge that gap as well. So are we showing empathy? Are we trying to understand where that other person is coming from? Second is, which leads us nicely on to the third question, is, are we seeking to understand? And I'm going to bring in a quote in a second. Many of you might have heard this, but I think it's an important point to bring in when we're looking at communication. So are we seeking to understand? And the fourth one there is, are we putting up any barriers? Are we putting up are we blocking ourselves off from listening to certain points because we don't want to hear it? Is there certain things we don't want to engage with? So we put up certain barriers and we miss out important information, and we're not demonstrating that we are trying to understand that other person. So 4 questions to think about when we're playing the listener. And that leads us nicely onto a quote by Stephen Covey. So if you read the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, it's an awesome book. I really recommend it. If you haven't read it, go and pick it up. If you have read it and it's been a while, pick it up again. It's one of those books you can read over and over again and get so much wisdom from. But there's one quote in particular that really sticks out in that book, especially when you're looking at communication. And that is, first seek to understand before seeking to be understood. And if we want to bridge that communication gap, if we want to have better communication, better conversations with people, and avoid conflict, whenever we enter that conversation, whenever we enter that communication, it's best for us to first to seek to understand that other person, their intentions, what they're trying to get across, what their points are, what's important to them, how they're feeling, before we jump in and make sure that we want them to understand us. So first seek to understand before seeking to be understood. I'm going to come back to the comments. Let's see if anything else is being brought in here. So Lakshmi is saying awareness, right language, commitment, key words. There are definitely 3 key words there. We're going to talk about the right language. We're going to talk about conscious language in a second. Brenda Lisa is saying something to keep in mind is cultural differences. Cultural difference is definitely something to keep in mind, something to be aware of. The more conscious we are on cultural differences, how people are being brought up differently, how people communicate differently, can definitely start to show up in conversations. Emma is saying, Emma, it's great to see you here. Thank you so much for tuning in. Emma is saying we also need to know what not to say and what to leave out. Exactly. Sometimes we need to hold things back, but maybe it depends on the depth and how much that thing is affecting us. But you're right, there's certain things that we need not to say if it's not important. Sometimes we say things just out of ego, but it's important if that, whatever it is that we're holding back, if it's affecting us, if it's giving us really negative feelings, if it's something we need to get off our chest, for want of a better phrase, then we need to find a constructive way to put it across. But you're right, there's certain things that we need to leave out of a conversation because it's just our ego that wants to put it in there. You know, the types of remarks like "I told you so" or something like that kind of attitude, things that lead like that is an example of many things. But no, definitely, Emma, really, really great point. Brenda Lisa is saying empathy and kindness while still delivering a message is key. 100% Brenda Lisa. If we can marry together empathy, kindness with delivery of a message, then we can really start to become better and more conscious communicators. Hey, Facebook user, wonderful to see you here. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you do want your name to appear, please just accept the StreamYard permissions or type your name in the comments box so I can say hello to you. Lakshmi is saying, can we learn to be better communicators? What do you think, Lakshmi? And I'm going to open that question up to everybody. Can we learn to be better communicators? I think we can. And I think it comes from doing that inner work, from reflecting and becoming more aware and putting it into practice. I would say over the past 10 years, I've improved massively in my communication, and there's still work that I need to do. There's still work I need to do. So I think we can learn to become better communicators, and it's just a case of putting that into practice. And it's starting to kind of put everything we've been sharing together today, from the comments that have come through and a few things that I've shared. When we put all them insights together, we can start to really learn how to be a better communicator. And I think when we become a better communicator, we had a really good discussion yesterday in our book club, and there's some great points on how to communicate better with the opposite sex. We're looking at men are from Mars and women are from Venus. We had some really great conversations on communication yesterday. It brought in the 5 love languages. It brought in how people deal with stress, how people deal with challenges, how men and women conflict with each other because we're programmed different genetically, then how that spans off to culture. We had really, really great conversations yesterday. So I think we can learn to be better communicators, but it's not something we can learn overnight. It takes time, work, and practice. And it leads me nicely on to this week's challenge. So this week's challenge for everybody is to speak less and listen more this week. So as a start, Lakshmi, if we're looking to be a better communicator, it's a good, and this is something I practiced when I start to get into the Tao. It's really heavily Tao centered to listen more and speak less. Based on the quote by Lao Tzu that says, "Those who speak do not know; those who know do not speak." Um, and it puts into practice if we just take that step back and try and share less. Just make a conscious decision to share less in a conversation and listen more. Take in more than what you're given when you have those conversations, and it will give you a better awareness. It will give you a different feeling. It will shift the dynamic of your conversations. So test out this week's challenge. Try to make the conscious decision just to sit back and listen more. I'm going to come back to the comments because we've got 8 minutes before we dive into our workshop. Brendan Lees is saying self-awareness is key, understanding who we are communicating, adjusting our communication style to our audience. It's not about others accepting me as I am, but working together. I love that, Brendan Lees. What wisdom there in that post. And I think it's very important that we adjust our communication for other people too. Adele is saying it is constant learning, even through listening now. I got reflection on communications I had today. That's great. And sometimes, we fall out of that flow. Sometimes we do let the ego get the best of us. So we're coming from a place of stress to the point where we react rather than respond. We cannot be perfect all of the time, and we cannot communicate great all the time. Emily's saying I have had to improve due to having to have a lot of difficult conversations with family members. As Brindley said, I had to learn how to deliver a difficult message with empathy and kindness. And it's not always easy. It's not always easy. But it's not what we share, it's how we share it. And it's finding that way to get that message across in a way that empathizes with that other person and shows kindness and clearly demonstrates what your intentions are. So the other person doesn't misinterpret it, thinking that we're coming from a negative space. So wonderful stuff here, wonderful wisdom being shared between you guys. Thank you so much. And that leads us nicely on to how we can start to build in that empathy and kindness through something called conscious language. And there's a few points here. There's a lot more we can go into detail here, but just to highlight 5 key points on conscious language. The first is use inclusive language. So what we mean by that is use words like we, us, our. Remember, it's something we're cooking together in a conversation. It's not pre-cooked meals we're bringing to that communication, to that conversation. We're here, we're doing something together. So use words like we, us, our, rather than you, yours, I, and me. When we use you and yours, we're telling somebody what to do. We're putting something on them. When you're saying I and me, you're tending to let your ego come into the space. So where you can, use inclusive language to show that you're on that journey to cook something up together. Use supportive language, showing empathy and care. So be very supportive with your language, show empathy, show that you care. If you don't understand, be open, ask, and tell them that you don't understand in a curious way, and be supportive. Respond rather than reacting. If you react, the other person's going to react, and all of a sudden a small little argument, a small little conflict is going to blow up into a huge argument just because you are reacting and adding fuel to the conflict. And it said that if you go back to and I don't want to go detailed in bringing transactional analysis here, but I'm going to put it in layman's terms here. But if you go back to, for our coaches who are tuned in, if you go back to the PAC model, it said that actually if you were to respond or come from a place without ego, without judgment, 2 or 3 times, even if that other person's reacting, you bring them to that same level as you. So you start to put that argument and that fire out. And in the PAC model, it's bringing people from a child to an adult just by 3 communications at that adult level. You help them meet you there. But that's going deep into transactional analysis. But just if you're interested, check out the PAC model, check out Eric Berne's work. It's really great to help understand how you communicate better. The next point there is deep listening and open body language. When you're talking to people, when you're face to face, make sure your body language is open. Don't sit there with your arms folded. Don't half listen. Don't look the opposite way. Give them your undivided attention and listen to listen, not listen to respond. So open body language. Then finally, seek to speak the other person's language. We all have different ways, different metaphors, different ways of understanding words, communication, and the more we can start to empathize, the more we can learn to seek to speak that other person's language. And the good start is when they use certain phrases, when they use certain terms, when you're reflecting back, use those terms with them. Use those same words back to them. You know, if they come to you and say, "Yeah, I've had a really shit day today," use the word. So why is your day being shit? Don't say, "Why is your day being absolutely awful?" Don't change the words. Just reflect back what they say, and that way you can start to help get that message, whatever it is you're trying to get across, and you can listen and start to understand their intentions and also your intentions and the action and impact that you're having on other people. So that is conscious language. Today we got our workshop at 6 p.m. So it's in 3 minutes time. We're going to start to look and reflect on the terms of communication. We're going to look at the concept of the communication arena. We're going to look at dealing with conflict. We're going to do an exercise on how we can deal with conflict. And we're going to look at how we can prepare for a difficult conversation. So there's times when we're going to have a difficult conversation. We know it's going to be a difficult conversation, whether it's telling our boss we're not happy at work, telling our partner that we're not happy in the relationship. There's going to be times when we have to have a difficult conversation. So we're going to look at how we can prepare for those times. And next session, so next week, if you tune in next week, we're going to be looking at speaking the language of love. We're going to stick on this module 2, which is relationships, how we can build relationships. Today is communication. Last week was setting boundaries. Next week is speaking the language of love. And if you haven't already, you can join my coaching room in hub.coachingminds.co.uk and we can connect. That's where you get access to all the replays, all the previous sessions that we had. It's all inside there. And that's where we can connect. We have power days. We get together for power days. We focus on your goals, your visions, all that sort of stuff. And you can drop me a message and contact me as well if there's anything you're unsure of. So in the last 2 minutes, I'm going to come back to the comments and take in any questions that you may have. So Emma's saying the link to the workshop. So it is in my hub. I'm not too sure if you're in my coaching room, Emma. If you're not, I will give you access. Don't worry. I'll send you a link to the Zoom session. So it's in the hub, but for anybody who's not in the hub yet, it's hub.coachingminds.co.uk, and the workshop is in my coaching room. So if you go down to my coaching room, you'll see it. You can access it there. So thank you so much for that question, Emma. Does anybody have any questions? Some really, really great insights that have come through today. Absolutely wonderful stuff. Really, really good questions, really good discussion going on here. I really, really enjoyed the wisdom coming from the room today. Communication is a big one, but it is the most important. It's what keeps our relationships ticking. And, you know, if we ever have relationship breakdowns, I'm not talking about relationships between partners or romantic relationships. I'm talking about all relationships that we have with partners, with our friends, with our family, with work colleagues. A breakdown in a relationship is always a sign of a breakdown in communication. So communication is so key, and there's a wide vast of different areas that we can cover when we talk about communication. Okay, so I can't see any questions coming through. We've got the workshop now. I will send a link to anybody who's asked in the comments box. I just want to say thank you so much to everybody who's tuned in. Thank you so much for the wisdom, for your thoughts, for your insights. Thank you for sharing your achievements over the week as well. It's absolutely wonderful to see you all here. I look forward to connecting with you in the workshop in just a moment's time. Have a wonderful week, and I'll see you in our next session. Thank you.